On the day of my wife's sister's wedding, my wife's parents and her sister completely ignored me. I said, "Congratulations," but she wouldn't even look at me. When I found out the reason, I quietly left the ceremony. An hour later, their calls started pouring in one after another. I turned off my phone and smiled silently. Chapter 1. The Wedding Day Silence. The church bells rang brightly and the hall buzzed with laughter, but for me it was strangely quiet. I stood at the entrance of my wife's sister's wedding, bouquet in hand, ready to greet her family. It should have been a joyous day. Family gathering, celebration, unity. So I smiled politely, approached her parents and said warmly, "Congratulations." But her father barely nodded, her mother didn't even meet my eyes. When I reached my wife's sister dressed in white, I repeated softly, "Congratulations." She turned her face away, as though I wasn't even there, not a word, not a glance. I felt dozens of eyes on me, the whispers circling, but no one explained. No one offered me a seat, a smile, or even a scrap of acknowledgement. And that's when I realized, this wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate. Something was going on, something they hadn't expected me to discover. Chapter 2. The Reason They Ignored Me. I slipped out of the banquet hall, the laughter echoing behind me like a cruel reminder. My chest felt heavy, not with sadness but with the weight of being treated like I didn't exist. On my way to the lobby, I passed two of her cousins whispering, they didn't notice me standing just behind the column. Her father said not to acknowledge him at all, he's not real family. Yeah, apparently the groom's side didn't want any association with him, they think he's beneath them. Their giggles cut sharper than any slap. Then my phone buzzed, a single notification from an old colleague I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, I just saw something weird, why is your wife's family spreading rumors about you at the wedding?" Attached was a photo taken at one of the pre-wedding gatherings. My name had been left off the family seating chart, crossed out in thick black ink. They hadn't simply forgotten me, they had erased me. I stood there, staring at that photo, listening to the faint sound of music and clinking glasses from the hall. And then, without a word, I straightened my jacket, walked past the lobby doors, and left the ceremony altogether. As I stepped into the quiet night, I didn't feel weak, I felt calm. Because I knew something they didn't. When people choose to publicly disgrace you, they forget that disgrace has a way of echoing back. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. One missed call, then another, then 5, then 10. I turned it off. And for the first time that day, I smiled. Because whatever they had planned for me was about to backfire in ways they couldn't imagine. Chapter 3. The calls that changed everything. As I drove away from the wedding venue, the phone on my passenger seat lit up again and again. One missed call, then 5, then 10. Just hours earlier they had acted like I was invisible, erasing my name, smirking as if I didn't belong. And now? Now they couldn't stop calling. Her mother, her father, even her sister, the bride whose eyes had refused to meet mine earlier. The hypocrisy was almost laughable. What they hadn't realized was that their little act of humiliation hadn't just stung me. It had exposed them. The cousins' whispers I overheard. The seating chart photo with my name crossed out. My sudden, quiet exit. Guests had noticed. And whispers had already begun swirling inside that hall. Guests asking, why did he leave? Why wasn't he treated as family? Their perfect facade was cracking, and they needed me back to patch it up. I parked the car at a quiet overlook, switched the phone off entirely, and let the night wrap around me. Their frantic calls, their desperation, all of it melted into silence. And in that silence, I smiled. Because finally, they were the ones left scrambling. They thought they could erase me with whispers and crossed out names. But by erasing me, they had erased their own mask. And soon, the whole world would see it. Chapter 4. The Fallout at the Reception. Back at the wedding hall, while I was sitting in peaceful silence with my phone turned off, chaos was unfolding. At first it was whispers. Didn't he just leave? Why wasn't he sitting at the family table? Why was his name missing on the seating chart? In a room filled with wealthy in-laws, old friends, and business associates, appearances meant everything. And now, their perfect wedding was beginning to look like a scandal. Her father, red-faced and sweating, tried to laugh it off when people asked where I was. Oh, he had an urgent call, he'll be back. But when an hour passed and I didn't return, his excuse fell flat. Her mother, desperate, started making calls right there in the hallway, her voice sharp with urgency. But of course, my phone was off. The guests noticed. They always notice. The bride herself, the one who had turned away from me coldly earlier, was furious. Where is he? People are asking questions, he's embarrassing us. But the truth was, I wasn't embarrassing them. They had embarrassed themselves by choosing to publicly erase me. And now they were choking on the consequences. As they tried to patch the holes in their story, they only made things worse. The guests' whispers spread faster than any toast or blessing. And while their perfect evening spiraled into rumors and side eyes, I sat in the quiet of my car, smiling. Because I knew this was only the beginning of their regret. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. The more I ignored their calls, the more their carefully constructed facade unraveled. Whispers had now turned into murmurs loud enough to be heard across the reception hall. Some guests even pulled out their phones, scrolling through social media, piecing together stories they'd heard before about how my wife's family treated me. One relative muttered, not so quietly, if they can humiliate their own son-in-law like that, imagine how they treat outsiders. That single remark spread like wildfire among the tables. The groom's parents, who valued reputation above all else, caught on quickly. They weren't fools. They could see the tension, the missing face, the frantic whispers. And they didn't like what they saw. Her father tried to laugh it off again, stammering excuses, but the groom's father leaned in sharply and said, "We expected dignity tonight, instead we get disgrace. What kind of family humiliates their own?" The bride's smile cracked as she overheard him. The bride, now cornered by her own guests, turned on her parents in fury. "You told me it wouldn't matter. You told me nobody would notice." But everyone had noticed. And worse, they were talking. As their perfect evening fell apart, I sat miles away, watching the city lights through my windshield. My phone was still buzzing on the seat beside me, call after call flashing across the screen. But I didn't pick up, because my silence was louder than anything I could have said in that hall. They thought ignoring me would erase me. Instead, it erased their dignity. And by the end of that night, they weren't laughing at me anymore. They were begging for me. Chapter 6. The begging. By the time the cake was cut and the music softened, their facade had completely collapsed. Even with my phone turned off, I could see the notifications stacking up when I checked it briefly. 15 missed calls from her father, 12 from her mother, 7 from the bride herself. Dozens of desperate texts, "Please come back, people are asking questions. You don't understand, it looks bad without you here. If you love this family at all, answer us." The irony was bitter and sweet all at once. Just hours earlier, I wasn't family enough to sit at their table. Now they wanted me back, not for me, but to save face. Guests cornered them with questions they couldn't answer. Why was he ignored? Why wasn't his name on the list? Why would he leave during the ceremony? Each question twisted the knife deeper. The more they scrambled, the more obvious it became. Their attempt to erase me had erased their dignity instead. Finally, her father made a scene, standing up and loudly declaring that I had family obligations that forced me away. But nobody believed him. The groom's side looked disgusted. The bride herself burst into tears, hissing at her parents for ruining everything. And still, their calls kept coming. I didn't return. I didn't answer. I didn't explain myself. Because nothing I could have said would punish them more than their own desperation, unraveling in front of the very people whose respect they craved most. That night, they wanted me invisible, an afterthought, a nobody. But in the end, it was their own panic, their own begging, that made sure everyone noticed me. And I wasn't even there. Chapter 7. The day after the wedding ended without me, but its aftermath had only just begun. By the next morning, their perfect day was the talk of the town, not for its beauty, but for its scandal. Guests whispered in group chats, neighbors gossiped over breakfast, and relatives replayed the moment I left. The groom's parents were livid. They'd invested in an image of prestige and respectability, only to discover their new in-laws had humiliated their own family member in front of everyone. If that's how they treat their own, how will they treat us? One of them reportedly said. The marriage started under a cloud of distrust, and everyone knew it. My phone, once again switched on, filled instantly with new messages. This time they weren't angry, they were pleading. We didn't mean it that way. You know how things get at weddings. Please don't ruin this for your wife's sister. But they were already ruined, not by me, but by their own choices. Their cruel erasure of me had left a mark that no apology could erase. I didn't reply. I didn't lash out. I didn't seek vengeance in words. Because I had already won. By saying nothing, by refusing to come back, I had forced them to destroy themselves in front of the very people whose opinion they valued most. They had thought silence would erase me, but in the end, my silence was the loudest thing in the room. Epilogue. The Long Shadow. The story didn't end with unanswered calls or whispered gossip. Their decision to erase me at the wedding set into motion consequences that rippled for years. The groom's family never forgot what they saw. What should have been a happy beginning became a strained union, filled with suspicion and judgment. The bride, once so proud, so eager to ignore me, was constantly reminded of the scandal that tainted her wedding. Every argument with her husband circled back to that night. Your family humiliated him. How can I trust you to respect mine? The perfect image her parents wanted cracked, and it never healed. In their social circle, dignity mattered as much as money. And the whispers never stopped. People remembered how they treated me, how quickly they panicked, and how desperately they begged afterward. Their arrogance had made them look petty, and their desperate calls made them look weak. No amount of charity dinners or polite smiles could erase that memory. They had exposed their true selves, and society never let them forget it. For my wife, the fallout was unbearable. She saw her parents beg me, saw her sister's marriage weighed down by resentment, saw their friends mock them quietly at every gathering. And every time she looked at me, she saw the men they tried to erase. The men who walked away calmly, letting their own actions destroy them. She never apologized. But she never mocked me again. Silence replaced arrogance. Respect replaced ridicule. And me. I never needed to explain myself. My silence had spoken louder than any confrontation. They thought ignoring me would erase me. But instead, my absence became the loudest presence in the room, the crack that shattered their carefully built facade. In the end, I didn't need revenge through anger. My revenge was simpler, sharper, letting them collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. And every time I saw their eyes flicker with regret years later, I smiled quietly, the same way I did the night of the wedding. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you have think about this story in the comments below. Like the story? If you think this story is justified, share it with someone who needs this energy.